You spot a file online, a piece of software, a movie, an album. The price tag is steep. The corporation selling it is massive and highly profitable. So you download it for free. You tell yourself they charge too much, and the technology makes it effortless to pierce right through their security. That high price traces back to the early days of the personal computer, when a few tech pioneers built massive software monopolies. They established the modern borders of intellectual property. This modern friction over digital files echoes a much older conflict. The act of reaching for what is forbidden, even when it's just code, belongs to a biological drive that predates the computer by millennia. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes described human existence in its natural state as nasty, brutish, and short. To escape that brutal reality, we banded together. We built rigid borders, strict laws, and structured societies to protect ourselves from the chaos outside. Here lies the contradiction. We are desperate to build systems of order to keep ourselves safe, yet we possess an innate biological drive to push past those exact boundaries the moment we set them up. The ancient Greeks understood this dangerous compulsion. We see it clearly in the tragedy of Oedipus Rex. As a king investigating a plague, Oedipus is warned by the prophet Tiresias to stop searching. His own wife, Jocasta, begs him to drop the investigation. They draw a clear line he is forbidden to cross. He ignores them. His psychological need to know the truth completely overrides his need for personal safety. When he uncovers that he murdered his own father and married his mother, the horror drives him to blind himself. We are a species willing to choose terrifying knowledge over comfortable ignorance. This raises a central question of the human condition. When our innate nature collides with the boundaries we've built, how do we distinguish a destructive criminal from a necessary pioneer? To see how this plays out on a macro scale, we can look at the Roman Empire. They built one of the most rigid, heavily fortified societal boundaries in history. This map shows the strict borders of the Roman Empire in late antiquity. The collapse of these boundaries didn't begin as a malicious invasion. Germanic tribes like the Visigoths crossed the Rhine and Danube rivers fleeing the Huns, desperately searching for food and safe shelter. But the sheer volume of this human movement entirely washed away the empire's rigid systems. The established order could not withstand millions of people refusing to respect a line on a map. Centuries later, human progress continued to be driven by people ignoring geographic limits. Merchants pushed deep into Asia to build new trade routes, and explorers sailed into uncharted oceans to map the globe. Even religion demanded we cross borders. Devout believers embarked on grueling pilgrimages across hostile territories to reach sacred cities like Jerusalem. Faith, curiosity, and greed are the defining human traits that crack geographical borders open and force history to move forward. Movement creates friction. When the impulse to survive pushes one group into another's territory, the act of crossing a boundary often transforms into an act of aggression. It is here that the drive to explore morphs into a drive to dominate. The evolutionary biologist Konrad Lorenz theorized that aggression is baked directly into our biology, a fixed action pattern triggered by competition for territory and resources. Like these cells, we are biologically primed to overtake what stands in our way. Because of this, our early systems of justice were often hypocritical. Athenian democracy, the supposed pinnacle of early justice, survived exclusively by crossing moral boundaries to subjugate slaves and women. To control this human aggression, the philosopher Immanuel Kant proposed a strict theory called retributivism. It demands rigid, proportional punishment. An eye for an eye. Kant's absolute system fails the moment context enters the picture. It offers no nuance for a starving person who steals a loaf of bread, or an abused wife who strikes back at her captor. Relying on pure retributive punishment creates a blind, broken world. It punishes the act without addressing the root cause of why humans transgress. When we look at the creators of modern peer-to-peer networks, they mirror those early maritime explorers. They built vessels to cross a vast digital ocean. In response, modern governments drafted legislation like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This functions exactly like an ancient emperor trying to hold back a massive human migration with a stone wall. These strict copyright extensions protect corporate monopolies,
but they actively stifle human curiosity.
They prohibit researchers from publishing findings on encryption flaws, locking up ideas under the threat of prosecution. When the law prioritizes absolute corporate control over human progress, the system itself violates the true spirit of justice. Still, we have to be honest about our motives. Downloading an album because you dislike the price tag lacks moral righteousness. True civil disobedience means marching to the sea to protest an oppressive salt tax, fully knowing you will face the consequences. Instead of Kant's rigid revenge, we need utilitarian rehabilitation. We need justice systems that expand, adapt, and absorb human context, rather than shattering under pressure. The same impulse that drove Oedipus to dismantle his own life now drives the creation of peer-to-peer networks and the dismantling of corporate firewalls. Perfect justice is an impossible utopia for an aggressive, curious species. True human agency requires the wisdom to build adaptable legal systems that finally accept our messy nature